we are all very big opinion-making machines, and we like for everybody to hear our opinion and adhere to our opinion of whatever it is. It's usually our default. When somebody texts us, because it's a very low emotion medium, we find ways to read the most negative version of it possible. The harder I push, the more hardened they become. The more you tell somebody they're wrong, the more convinced they are that they're right. You're meant to feel the warmth of somebody's smile, not read it in an emoji. You need to get up and start going. I don't know what it is, but I need to start moving.
You could say lawyer, but then you could say trial lawyer. And that very quickly paints a picture of what it is that you do. And I'm so grateful you came to be a part of this today.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Very, very much. It is odd. You know, I like what you've done with the truck. I think the inside of the decor is quite good. You've gone for the different interior for the vehicle. There's a lamp now, which is nice.
It's all green screen. Don't worry. It's all just...
that you live outside of a vehicle is nice. But I do kind of love how far you've risen to prominence from the front seat of a vehicle and requiring as someone with a broadcast studio background, it just speaks to, if your message is clear and of value, it doesn't matter what kind of camera you got, it doesn't matter where you're standing. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I wanted to ask, like, when you were a young man, what was it that drew you towards law? When did you get an idea that, oh, that's a job that I reckon I'd like?
You know, I didn't really know there were that many others. Yeah, I'm a fifth generation attorney.
Oh, so right.
My dad's an attorney. My grandfather's an attorney. My great-grandfather was a federal judge, and it just keeps going. And so, you know, when I was a kid, you think of, at least in my part of South in the U.S., men will kind of get together around an event. You know, maybe it's a barbecue, maybe it's something hunting, maybe it's something. All of my family members were attorneys. And so I just thought, well, this is just a family business. This is what I'm doing. And so I saw a whole lot of courtrooms. I watched a whole lot of trials. I was in a ton of depositions. I bet you I was in more depositions watching them as a kid than most practicing attorneys even now. Like it was just a lot. It was a whole lot.
What? Because they're like, oh, we've got no one to mind little Jeff. Who's bringing Jeff? Okay, you just sit in the corner, don't say anything. That sort of thing?
Yeah. So my mom had, I'm the oldest of four, so she wasn't gonna, she's taking care of, so dad would pick me up and then, give me some kind of notepad and sit me in a corner and just be quiet, and so I'd draw, I'd doodle, but you observe and you get to see a lot. And so, there was a big part of me that I really thought I was going to go into music right there at the tail end of college.
Yeah.
And decide to, because I loved music. And I've always had kind of a creative streak. And I thought, no, I think this just feels right to me. And I went to law school, and man, I felt more comfortable in law school than I ever did in college. Like things just clicked. I just been
What
around
was your
it my whole
instrument,
life.
Jefferson?
Drums. Drums is my instrument. Yeah. But I mean, I was going to I love the whole publishing, agent, management section of like the business of music, songwriting. I've been in bands most of my life, so.
Oh, okay. Then the teenage band that rehearsed in the garage was called?
Oh, that was a good one. This one was Remnant. This one was called Remnant. That was one of them that we had.
And were you playing your own songs or were you playing covers?
Both. Both. Yeah. It was awesome.
Just to give us an idea of the style you were doing, what was the big one? What was the big cover that you were like, yeah, this is the one?
All the Things That I've Done by the Killers.
Oh, right.
That was big. The Killers were huge at the time. And that was really big for us at the time. We loved that.
Man, your parents must have really, must have been doing something right, because to support a teenager through a drumming habit, that's a lot. It is a lot of impact on the household.
Yeah, they definitely did it. You know what? I didn't get my first drum set until I was 18. I was always borrowing friends. And
Right.
so that was because they weren't gonna that was just we didn't really have room in the house. So I was always at another friend's playing music and doing that. But yeah, but I wanted to let you know if my voice sounds more quiet, it's the kids are asleep.
Oh, mate, I know all about that. We have one of our kids is the same age. We have a 6-year-old, as
Yeah,
well, and, my studio is right under his bedroom. So
yeah, you get
when
it,
I'm
you get
doing
it.
when I'm doing late night stuff, we have very
Right.
stifled laughs if I have guests in here. But I
Yeah,
totally
yeah. Then
understand it.
you know what it's like.
I ask these questions because it it does kind of paint a picture of how when I see your work and I read your book, there seems to be more wisdom and knowledge here than someone could accumulate within your lifetime. And
Yeah.
I understand now. It's like, oh, because I watched at least 4 relatives of mine do it, and I absorbed it, like the way I absorb the way that my parents speak to people,
Mm,
the way that my son and my, stepdaughter look at the way that, my wife and I work and the way we treat people in public. That's how they work in the way that they treat people in public. And that also has an effect on the kid. And if you're watching, and I asked about the music, and this is the thing that really fascinates me because all speech is musical and
mm,
all speech has cadences. And depending on how you use those cadences and how you pace it
yeah.
and how quickly you get to the hook, is how, effectively you can communicate. So it makes sense to me that music and the musical brain as a part of what it is that you do.
Yeah, you get it. There's a lot of, when you can tell when somebody's rushing, rushing the moment. When you have the chance, in conversation, when you can just be in the pocket and, things mesh, but that also has to do a lot with, what sounds good to the ear, of is somebody talking disjointed versus is it melodic, do you like the tenor, the timbre of the voice? I mean, every little crevice. So I think it's true, definitely that music, aspect of it, and, I also kinda had a very different childhood in a way. My dad taught me, uh, would have big talks with me using the Socratic method. So, for those who don't know what that is, in law school, they use the Socratic method, meaning they ask questions to teach. So, if you were assigned the reading, you'd be called to stand up and they'd ask you about the facts of the case, the issues of the case, what has to be, what's the holding? Now let's talk about the reasoning, and then let's flip it on you, and then why don't we? And we argue the other side. And so the goal is to make you understand the other person's argument better than they do, and to know everybody's where are the holes. And he kind of did the same way. And so when I'd be upset about something, or let's say I was, in a mood about something my mom had told me, he was really good, even though it was incredibly frustrating at the time, to flip it always and ask me questions of, well, what do you think she's thinking? And when you say that, how do you think the impact is on her? I'm like, oh man. And so those are things that I think are all part of a way that, yeah, it probably gave me a jump start in ways to communicate.
So I've got mates who are lawyers and or became lawyers. One of them walked away. So like, nah, I'm not going to do that
Yeah.
after 9 years of whatever.
Yeah.
But from what I can gather, there's a lot of work, a lot of reading. How much of your training as a lawyer in the States has got to do with the way that you communicate? Because as a trial lawyer, your job is quite performative, which is why it makes great television because it's this big
Sure.
monologue, performative moment. Atticus Finch.
Yeah.
That's kind of the it's up there as the Gregory Peck doing
Yeah.
that in Kill a Mockingbird, and it goes from there. Few Good Men, you name it. How much of your training as a law student involves communication and involves how to use your voice?
Mm. Law school teaches you how to read the law. It doesn't really teach you how to read people. Now, you can have an area of expertise that has to do with trial law, litigation, meaning there are plenty of attorneys that never see the light of day in a courtroom. They don't want it anywhere, they don't want to see it. And then there are people like me who can't get enough of it. And so if I can be in front of a judge, be in front of a jury, it's absolutely has a huge aspect of it that is purely performative. But at the end of the day, it's the client's facts that carry the day. I can't make up my facts. I can't make up the law. And the jury's going to do what the jury's going to do, or the judge. But it's definitely has a theater aspect to it, because to want to advocate, that is to put breath and momentum into a client's case and cause. There are times I'm going to need to highlight things, and I'm going to be things where I need to suppress things. There are things that I'm going to want to emphasize, I'm going to want to de-emphasize. And so when I'm taking a whole bulk, I could be dealing with 10 years of a client's life and their whole life and everything they know and their expertise. And I have to figure out a way to pull it into just sentences, take just a whole years worth of stuff. And how do I crunch it down into 2 weeks when I only have so much time? So you get really good at synthesizing what's the pinpoint of if you heard that you've seen those books that are they're called I Spy books, where it's you may not, it's like or Where's Waldo, where it's
Right.
it'll be you have to find something on the page, and it's
Oh, yes, I
that's
know
it
those
right
ones,
there.
yes.
It's yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's kind of what it is. And you have to get really fast and good of seeing a whole bunch of facts, seeing a whole bunch of everything and going, that's the issue. That's what I
Yes.
have to pull and draw from. And so there's definitely an aspect to where I'd probably say in trial, honestly, I'd say 60% of it is at least performative. But at the same time, I've seen guys and women that are attorneys, and they're not very charismatic. They're not very personable, but they were genuine, but they were real. They were authentic, and they weren't trying to be somebody else, and they still did a wonderful job of representing their client.
I have something quite in common with you in that both my parents were doctors, and on Saturday, I'm number 2 of 4 boys, and so going to work with mum or dad when, we were in between getting looked after, if we were sick or whatever, was going to a
Yeah.
hospital, was being in these places full of
Mm.
antiseptic smells and the moans of people underpaying and
That
things like this. And my dad would talk about that. By the time he got to about 11 a.m., seeing the first 3 or 4 patients, he'd say, he's you know, it was the 90s and 80s and stuff. People were he
sure,
said,
sure.
"I feel like I've had a Xanax because I feel just this
Yeah.
overwhelming sense of joy from helping a person."
That
And, when I read your book, there's a particular story you tell about a man you were helping. He was in a traffic accident. And I'm interested to know, how does it feel to be able to help a person who is in a desperate situation like that man is?
it's both a blessing, and at the same time, it can begin to quickly feel for me, of course, it's a wonderful feeling when somebody messages me or emails and says something that it's beautiful words of something I've done as a human that's impacted them as a human. What better thing could I ever want? What better use of my life and my purpose, if not to help other people? It's a wonderful blessing. Um, to me, whenever somebody's saying really nice things, what I struggle with is this aspect of believing it. Yeah, I almost feel like it's as soon as you feel like you deserve those nice words is the very moment you don't. Yeah, that's the moment you've kind of lost it. If you feel like you ever are truly deserving of the words. And so I feel it, I hear it, I accept it, but I can't carry it. And so it's much easier. It's lighter, let's say it that way.
I
Whenever
understand.
you are, yeah, you're able to help in a wonderful way.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me to come from, I never thought I'd be doing this. I thought I was going to be doing the law firm thing forever, and we still have a wonderful law firm. I'm just not able to handle cases, but I'm able to reach exponentially more people. So it's the
Mm.
same. It's like that little feeling multiplied
Yeah.
to where it's almost so much that you can't sift through it. It's like the difference of if you had one person who's a stranger comment on your message and something nice, you're like, this is wonderful. And then if you have thousands of people comment, and in over a year, it just feels different. So it's like harder to make sure that I'm not taking any of it for granted. That's the key for me.
You're a very humble man. You're a model of wonderful humility, sir.
Oh,
as
thank
my
you.
man, I'm sober. I've been sober for just over 16 years. But my man, he said to me early on, he's like, man, you got to find humility before humility finds you. Like, thank you.
Oh, that's good.
But it's an
That's
important
good.
thing to have.
Yeah, well, it's found me too,
Yeah. Because I sometimes talk to people. I'm nowhere near your scope of or scale, but I sometimes help people because I've worked in broadcasting for a long time, and I
Mm.
sometimes help people with how they present. And one of the things I talk about is there's a long-running study from Chapman University in the US. I think they've done it 12 years now. The list of what people are afraid of. Like, here's the things that people are afraid of. And when it comes to social phobia, in the top 10 things, I've got them written down. So number 10 is making phone calls. Number 9, being critiqued or evaluated. Number 8, asking questions in a group. Number 7, using a public restroom. I have that one. Stage fright, can't use a urinal. Number 6, being observed, someone watching you eat. Number 5, small talk. 4, meeting new people. 3, being the center of attention. 2, speaking to authority figures. Number 1, public speaking. So of the top 10 things that people are afraid of, 7 of them involve communication.
Yes.
This is something so enormous, and yet we spend no time, at least in my education, no time at all learning anything about it.
No, we really don't. We're taught a lot of things, but we're not really taught how to handle any of those like very gripping things, which to me is just kind of highlights the irony of it, because it's things that we naturally do. I don't need to go buy something to be able to talk to somebody. You don't need to go out and download something to be able to talk to somebody. But I think it also highlights that that the message that we get to talk about right now are things that really do help a lot of people. And so what does that mean? Well, we could look at it one of two ways. One, we could say, man, how bad is that for people? How depressing? Or we could flip it and say, how exciting is it that we get to now teach and talk and train people in something that we know is going to give them value? How awesome is that? And I choose the second one.
And that's the magic of being a human being. It's the superpower that we all have, is that we get to decide how we feel about something. The psychologist Fritz Perls said, excitement is fear without the breath. And they did a study where they tested them, I think, in karaoke and maths and also public speaking. Those who said out loud, oh, I'm excited, and labeled this feeling, performed better. It's very, very, almost exactly the same feeling, being nervous and excited.
Yeah.
All we have to do is just frame it. But we get to decide what that is when our brains are working well. My brain has gone through a period of time where it wasn't working very well, but I got a lot better.
We all have. We all have. Some of us are still in it. I agree. It's just that's that reframing. And I think there's a lot of things in life, just as I think you wonderfully illustrated, that it's just a simple flip is a great way of unlocking something that could be as simple as between excitement and fear, which is, that's huge. Same way of the way we feel of physical danger versus social danger. The fear of imminent harm physically to me feels the same as fear of social harm done to me. That same, I'm going to be embarrassed. Somebody's going to offend me. I'm going to look like a fool. It's that same gripping, type of things that in your body of, what do you do with that? It's just a simple flip. I think it's a great way to it's the reframe.
One of the things you talk about is making sure, like, this is all well and good for us to chat about. We're in a podcast scenario. You know the parameters of the conversation. I know the parameters of the conversation.
Yeah.
You're trusting that I'm prepared. I hope I've shown you by now that I am. We're cool. We're not trying to figure out if your kids are allowed to watch YouTube with no adult in the room at this point in time. We're not trying to talk about
Yeah.
something highly emotive, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And
Mhm.
when we're in those moments, for me, it's very difficult when I start to get frustrated in a conversation with my wife or my stepdaughter. It's very difficult for me to go, "Well, what does she need out of this?
Mhm.
How's this feeling for her?" Um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and you're right about, figuring out if we're even having the same conversation. And I'm wondering if you could kind of, offer the people listening and watching, what's something that we can do when we do find ourselves in that moment of frustration where we're starting to feel things kind of rising within us, we're starting to hear our own voice change, we're starting to cut off the end of the other person's sentences because we're not listening. What are some things that we can do in those moments?
Yeah, whenever those you're having that moment where I like how you said you're cutting off somebody else's sentences, right? You keep pushing. You can feel that you're elevating. You can feel your heartbeat. Things. How can you tell? Because it's generally it's described as this feeling that you need to move. All right, you need to get up and start going. I don't know what it is, but I need to start moving. And we often will do that with our voice. So we'll speed up. We'll increase our volume. We are saying things are need to ratchet up. I need to, whatever it is, it's going upwards. It's not going down. We're not slowing down, we're speeding up. And the one thing that's going to stop you for that is what I teach every one of my clients that go into a deposition or a cross examination is let your breath be the first word that you say. Meaning, wherever your first word would be in your response, put a breath in its place. And what it does is it helps bring you back to a more regulated state. Now, it's not going to help if you've already blown the top off, right? What I'm saying is if unregulated looks like a level 50 for you, if you're past 50, the breath's not going to help. Time's going to help. 20 minutes is going to help you, not a breath. But if you're at a level 10, well, I can get you back down to a level 2. If you're at a level 30, I can get you back down to a level 10. So that breath is what helps regulate you. And it also helps regulate the other person. So that pause, that little break does something mutually beneficial. It helps you kind of refocus and tell the other person, signaling to them that you're actually trying to listen. You are trying to take this more seriously. You are trying to ground yourself in what you're about to say rather than continuing to ratchet up a level. Because when you do meet them, let's say somebody comes in at the conversation way too hot and they're at a 5 and they've said something snarky to you. And they say, you know what, this is just like you. You know what, you just sound just like your mom or whatever it is. And you decide to come right back and meet them and talk at a louder voice. All you've done is tell them you're exactly who they said you were. You're exactly who they thought you were in your mind. You've just convinced them that you are exactly what I just said. And you've just given them permission to now go up even higher. I mean, and it just continues until somebody breaks. That's what
Mm.
happens. Somebody eventually breaks and somebody's says something too much. They've crossed the line and usually a whole lot of damage is done by then. Like it's a lot of self-sabotage, I find. So if there's something that I would want you to do is take a breath before you go into that response. Because we're fighting every disagreement, every opinion that is not like yours triggers that fight or flight. It's just part of our nervous system. So what you're hearing is when I want to fight you with my words, I'm going to say something that hurts. Like I'm not going to throw something, but I'll throw my words. I'm going to want my words to cut. I'm going to want my words to sting. I'm going to want my words to do something to you that causes you to go away. Because you as a threat to me, either a threat to my thoughts or a threat to my identity, or maybe a threat to my autonomy in that moment, or my credibility. It's I want you to go away. Same thing with if you and I are in an argument and I decide, you know what, I'm going to leave the room. I'm out over. I'm going to slam the door. I'm going to hang up the phone. It's all that thing. And so breath helps things not to be so fuzzy around you.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you've talked about is when it comes to trying to figure out if you're in the same conversation, and this happens, to me. I have a different brain. I am on the edges of the bell curve. Some of the things I can take medication for, some of the things I just have to figure out. I make the joke, I don't live with complex mental illness, my family does. And I don't live with neurodiversity, my family does. But I often find myself in one of the things you talk about, which is I don't realize that I'm in an emotional conversation because I think I'm in a logical conversation. Like, you always forget to take the bins out. Well, I don't actually. Not always. And I'm speaking in facts, but they're speaking in emotion. If we find ourselves in that moment, what are some things that we might be able to do, or what are some ways we might be able to identify that we're actually having a different conversation?
Like, to me, I see this as radio frequencies. Like, if you and I are on I'm right here and you're right here, and we're not lined up, attuned to the same frequency, there's going to be a lot of static. Like, we're not going to hear the same message. And most of the time, what we're hearing is some way of, we make it some way about ourselves, as if they meant to do you harm. And that's usually our default. When somebody texts us, because it's a very low emotion medium, we find ways to read the most negative version of it possible. But yet we see the most positive when we're sending it to somebody else. So what I encourage people to do is let's say twofold. One is, instead of this, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. Ask it, just flip it. Ask a question. What did you hear? Okay, that's obviously, that's not what I felt like I said. What did you hear? That's a very quick way of going, okay, I'm going to tune to your frequency. Because obviously we're miscalculated here. I want to tune to your frequency. Another I like to do is use the phrase, I can tell. Like, I can tell that's making me defensive. I can tell that's upsetting me. I can tell I'm not ready for this conversation. If you don't claim it, you can't control it. You can't regulate what you cannot name. And if I don't have a name for how I'm feeling in that moment or what's going on in me, then there's not really much chance that you're going to know what I'm feeling either. And so you're just going to guess. And because we're extremely contradictory, we don't like if you guess it right. Like, we don't like things when it's your idea. I like it. I prefer it when it's my idea.
Yeah.
I know I'm bad about this. Is my wife, Sierra, could be like, you know what? I think we should do this and do that. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And it's like a few hours later, I'm like, you know what we should do? We should do that. And I say the almost verbatim thing that she said. Is she's like, I just said that. I'm like, okay, that might be true. But that's part of my that's part of my problem.
I love it. Those two doctors I mentioned before, terrible patients, the worst.
Yeah. Oh, for
Terrible
sure.
patients.
Oh my God.
Just because you're a super communicator, educator of millions, doesn't mean you're great at it sometimes.
No, that means no. At home, what do you mean? I was like, okay. She was like, okay, Mr. Communicator. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. So she gets it. But you saying, like, you saw and you're good with a certain level of dealing with what you saw at the hospital.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that came natural for you.
It's a part of being human. There's people getting born,
correct.
There's people dying. Yeah.
That's right. Whereas other people who didn't have that upbringing would find that very different. They'd have a much harder time with it. Mine is, I saw arguments, extremely shouting matches, emotional, nasty, back and forth, just very intellectual people arguing. All right. And so you see two people yelling at a restaurant, it didn't affect me at all. It's the same way of like you've seen a lot of patients at a hospital. I think there has a lot to be said for that.
But that means you've been exposed to arguments by two people who are at their core trying to find the same thing, which is often how husbands and wives or partners in any way will fight, because it's not about the dishes. It's about, I want a home where I feel valued and my work that isn't out of this house, or my work with the kids, or, my ideas of what to do on the weekend are as important as yours.
Exactly.
Because I love this relationship.
Whose job
and I
is
want
more
it to
important?
be okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hands down. And I think that brings in a different level of depth and complexity, because there's all these like bids for connection that are really easy to miss, and we get really sore if they get missed. And so it's a hard subject, especially when you get into relationships. But as you said, just because I talk to a lot of people does not mean that I always get it right either.
But everything is a relationship. And when you think about really big business deals, for example, like the kind of ones you read about where like, oh, such and such has merged with such and such a company for $120 billion or something gigantic, right? Those deals did not get done over a text message. Those deals did not get
No,
done over an email.
no. Yeah.
They were two people looking at each other and using their voices and seeing signals in the other person's faces and understanding where the line was and how they could find a value that was the same and move forward. What do you think, Jefferson, what are we at risk
Uh,
of if we allow too much of our communication to happen by putting our thumbs on a screen?
you miss out on the very thing that makes us human, the very uniqueness of it. I like to say you're meant to feel the warmth of somebody's smile, not read it in an emoji. It's good to be able to show nuance, emotional nuance in text messages, but it's a low grade emotion channel. Nothing is going to ever replace face to face communication. Nothing. I mean, we can have a supplement for it. Even video conferencing is great. It's nothing compared to being in the same room as somebody and being able to experience their whole person, the aura, the vibes, the everything that they have. I find it so funny when sometimes you might know somebody like this who their emails can be really snippy, and but you go and see them in person, and they're just as happy as they can be. I that would happen a lot in the legal world where you get an email from somebody, another attorney, and be like, "Oh my gosh, they sound like they're just miserable." And you go meet them, no, they're just happy as can be because we read our own emotions into it. So it's twofold. One, we do a bad job of communicating because we feel like what is sent is exactly what is received. And we do bad enough face to face. Removing us to thumbs on the screen, it's not going to help. It helps in efficiency. It's definitely efficient, but it's transmission. It's not connection.
The other thing I feel that we tend to ignore or gloss over is we often never think about what a room feels like before we walk into it and what it feels like when we're in it for the other people. I've got significant permanent hearing damage from my years in the music industry, etc. So I had to learn a lot about how much of our communication is actually the words. It's very small. It's like less than 7%. More of
Mm.
it is with context, is with facial expressions, it's with tone, it's things like this. But it's also just the feeling of being, as you mentioned, of being in a room, all right? And we've all been in that room. Like when you were a kid and you went to go and play at your friend's house and their parents had just had a fight and you walk in, you can tell, right?
Hmm.
And so our communication also involves how do we carry ourselves? What can I take responsibility for and what can I know that is my value? These things I think are things we often don't consider when it comes to how we communicate.
I think that's an individual question for what they would want to bring into the room. Like, what do you want to, like, we all talk about to leave the world better than we found it. We want to leave for the next generation and our children. We want to leave it better than we found it. Well, let's apply that on a very small scale. Why can't we leave a room better than we entered it? And what would that have to be? What would that have to look like? What would need to happen for that to happen in this room of yours? For me, it would need to be a sense of warmth. I want to be a light when I walk into it. I want people to feel good. I think most people would agree. They want people to feel good. They don't want people to feel bad. But like you said, those are just words. How do you do that with other context? To me, it has a lot to do with the facial expressions. If you are smiling more, if you do seem more pleasant. Like, I have one of my best friends, if we're, like, kinda standing next to each other, maybe we're just, like, in a half circle talking to other people, he or I, like, we just I might put my hand on his shoulder and just kinda jostle him. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of like we did as kids, and that's just like "I love you, guy." Like, "I love you, dude," without having to say anything, and we all have those kind of male relationships or how it can be with it doesn't matter who, but it's those, like, little moments of, how can I show you that I'm paying attention to you and I care about you without having to say anything? How can I find a moment to be playful? How can I take a moment to make sure that the whole room's not being so serious and kinda having to balance it? I think that's something of maybe my personality is I tend to be a balancer. If I go to a dinner table and everybody's pretty quiet, I tend to kind of bring a lot more energy because I wanna level it. But if I go to let's say some kind of networking event and it's all these, let's say it's 10 guys who all they wanna talk about is just like you said, how they just merged $2 trillion as like, okay, I'm gonna be a lot more quiet because I need to balance that out. Like
Yeah.
I have no desire to compete in that world. And so I find that we do that a lot even in smaller sections of family and friends, and if they're having a hard time, how can I bring them up?
Yeah.
If they're having a great time, how can I make sure that I don't steal that light?
You mentioned, the way of being like touching your friend, like being personable with your friend. Human touch is a
Yeah.
really important
Yes.
thing for us, is one of the things that we need when we're little. There's all sorts of studies, they're horrible. Uh, when you read about,
Yeah.
kids that been studied that weren't touched, it's
Oh,
awful.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
We
rough.
we need it, and we also need to be around other people. It is one of the things that makes us feel safer as humans. It's one of the things we need. We need to be connected with other human beings to be in the space with other human
Mhm,
beings.
mhm.
And I know you've written about this, the paradox of connection. Like right now, people are, I'm assuming they're either listening to us or watching us on a thing they're holding in their hand, probably by themselves.
I know I'm somebody who, when I communicate with you and I'm meeting for you for the first time, I'm gonna make sure that I have enough of a boundary for you to make sure you don't feel like I'm up in your face. But I will make sure that I might touch your elbow if your arms are like this,
Mhm.
just like, "Hey, it's great to hey, thank you for that." Like, just that little thing, or if you were talking to me and I would just bump your shoulder and say, "That means a lot to me." Just any way of that just sensation of
Mhm.
touch, it does something different to our brains
Yeah.
because what you said is exactly right. We crave for community. We When we move to a new place, first thing we do is, how can I get more people in my circle? How can I find seats at my table? And that's what we're looking for. And we're just at the end of the day, we're just looking for a crowded table, to have of our own friends.
And I would put it to you as well, Jefferson, that we're just looking to connect, even in those
Mhm.
depositions where you're,
Yes.
deposing some. Don't even know what it is. It's like you're trying to get information
Mhm.
from the other side in a legal case to get so you're all on the same. Uh,
Mhm.
Everyone's working from the same set of facts. All right. Even in those moments, you're just trying to connect with this person. It's like, I'm just trying to get the true part out. You are trying to connect, even when you may think you're adversarial. What are some ways that we might be able to figure out the thing that we're trying to connect over, no matter what the conversation is we're having?
There's a mindset that I like to apply, and it's this. It's when you go into your next conversation, have something to learn, not something to prove. And for me, it's this reset of making sure that I'm not trying to just make them push. I'm not trying to only just push my point, because the harder I push, the more hardened they become. The more you tell somebody they're wrong, the more convinced they are that they're right. That's why you've seen the same news cycles. A lot of times facts don't matter. Evidence, data doesn't matter. It's how they feel about it. They don't care. And juries do that all the time. You could show some piece of evidence, but if it goes against just how they're feeling at that moment, that makes them uncomfortable to change their mind, they're not going to. And so when you have that outlook of knowing that, yeah, they're all just little bits for connection in some way. Now, that being said, there are some people who are just out to really misunderstand you. There's some people out there that really their intent is to do harm. Often when I first take on a client, I really try to understand what that issue is because my goal is achieved if they don't need me. Like if because I've seen so many cases that they go, you know what, if they would just apologize, I'd probably withdraw the whole case. I'm like, then you're doing the case for the wrong reason. Like this is not how that's supposed to go. You need to go call them and you need to go have about a 4 hour, half a day meeting with this person to talk it all out instead of this measuring contest that who's gonna, what they call play chicken, it's like who's gonna give up first.
Yeah.
And so many times that's what leads to the lawsuit. And then let me tell you what, lawyers rarely, if ever, make anything easier. All right. Because now you don't get to talk. It's now somebody talks for you. Now your information now becomes client files and cases. And now more people know. And then now it gets more complicated. It always becomes more complicated. So yes, those simple little bits for connection of just deciding to have the conversation. Like the longer you avoid it, what I like to say is the conversation you're avoiding is the result you're choosing. Like you're choosing the result if you don't decide to tell that person what you need to tell them.
When we avoid difficult conversations, we think that it feels like there's a short-term gain. Like, oh, I don't have to, for example, I don't have to talk to my 6-year-old. I don't have to deal with a tantrum about taking the iPad off him. All right? It's difficult to do that. The longer I leave it with him, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the analogy I would use for any difficult conversation that you're going to have. What
Mhm.
would you say to people about those difficult conversations they may need to have with a family member, perhaps at work, about someone who's, you know, just making their job really hard? What do people need to know about what it is to actually have that difficult conversation?
There's this idea of priority, right? What's the priority of this person in your life? Are they somebody that was just meant to be on one page? Are they also going to be in the next chapter of your life? Or are they just going to show up on that one moment in that one paragraph? So you have to understand this. Is it worth it? Is that person worth it? Two would be the timing. There's some conversations that don't need to be said right now, but you know that time will come later. It just knows not right now. Not maybe 5 years from now. Might be something you've journaled about, and you just know that you feel like God's gonna make a way to have that conversation somewhere along the way. And it's that timing is gonna be right, but it's not gonna be right now. I would say, how do you know if it's the right time? If you feel like you've been thinking about it a whole day and you wake up the next day and it's still in the back of your mind, and a week goes by and it's still in the back of your mind, you need to let it go. Otherwise, you're letting it live in your head rent free. And that's not something you need to do. The third circle would be, am I the one to say it? Because there's so many times, I want to give somebody a piece of my mind, but I don't think I'm the right person. Like somebody else needs to have this conversation. That lesson doesn't need to be applied for me because I feel like we are all very big opinion making machines. And we like for everybody to hear our opinion and adhere to our opinion of whatever it is. And sometimes when you kind of go through that rank of timing, priority, and am I the one to say it, you might get a different result than you thought.
There's a thing in your work that, when I watch your videos and I see the things that you put out, it does remind me a little of the kind of Peter Boghossian way of dissecting how someone believes what they believe, like by just simply asking questions.
Mhm.
For example, you offered one idea. When someone says, "No offense," but you got to, and you go, "Well, hang on, but is it? Is it offensive?" When
Yeah,
you
right.
kind of then dissecting where they're coming from to go, are you about to say something that you would find morally horrible to say to a person, perhaps that you care about or work with, but you're throwing cover of saying no offense at the hope of getting away with it. And then we're going to have to figure out a way to talk about this thing. You're kind of almost pushing them into it. And I kind of like that, the idea of unpacking a little bit about where the other person's coming from to help you both get to the actual issue.
Yeah. And if there is one thing that I have seen work very well in communication, is the more you can turn statements into questions, the more you're going to be able to thread that out, to parse that out. Because some things aren't going to be solved in one conversation. People think, oh, I'm just going to talk to somebody and they're just going to go with me and it's going to take 5 minutes and we'll be done. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Some things need to take a lot of conversations before they're ultimately going to be reached. But when you are able to, like that, when somebody says, I don't mean this to be rude, you get to say, but is it rude? It's it's a great way of kind of checking it rather than saying, okay, well, let's go ahead and see if it's rude. But if they're saying it, probably already is. So usually even if I were to say, what's another way you could say that, is a way that it allows them to kind of fix it. I also like this one. This one's not a question, but I do like it. I'll say, I need you to say that to me differently. And it's usually a way for them to go, okay, how I just sent it kind of got rejected. So go back to the drawing board kind of thing. You get to choose what words you accept, what words you reject, what words you've decided matter anything to you at all. You get to matter if they matter to you. You get to decide if those words mean something to you. And so if somebody says something, I get to decide if I accept it or if I don't. I get to decide if I go, no, try again. Because I have a very firm grip on my manual of like, what's my operator's manual of, I will communicate with you when. It's like instructions to opening up a kid's Lego toy. Like there's some blocks that just aren't going to fit. And the sooner I can tell you that this is the way to communicate with me, and if you can't abide by those instructions, then there's no conversation. And I'm at peace with that. The better everybody's life's going to be.
Earlier in our chat today, it was very clear, and I could tell by the way your tone of voice, not because your kids were asleep, but the way your voice changed, the way your body language changed, that humility is a very important thing for you to maintain a hold of. What in your work, what have you uncovered about what happens when ego gets in charge?
Bad things. Bad things. I don't think anything good has ever come of that. For me, it's also a spiritual thing. If for me in my faith is truly that when I am less, then I make room for more. And that's usually more good things. And I'm not going to be able to even be in a position for other things to be facilitated if I'm taking up too much space. Like it's not that you're trying to make things about you. You're also cutting off the connections of other people that can be made. Ego is something that's, as we always say, it's very fragile, right? I can give a talk to thousands of people, and then I could be sometimes, like every comedian, is like this. They can be amazing, and then they go back and they start beating themselves up. I should have done this. I should have gone with this joke. I should have. I've heard pastors do that. I've heard all kinds of public speakers do that, and they'll go start getting in their head about it. Egos are very fragile. But what I've learned is that if your day doesn't really start with surrender, if you don't understand that it's typically, if you're in a bad spot, it's because your best thinking got you there. That's what really drives home for me of if I can just realize that I don't really know that much. And the more I feel like I do, the less I know. There's like this quote that I like, the story of a guy who was like celebrating his 90th birthday, and they said, what's it like to know so much? He said, I'll let you know at 95. It's like, you're always just continuing to improve. But I feel like if you ever start pulling on ego, that's usually a string that unravels pretty fast.
It's usually the thing that's reacting with me, and it's a thing that's finding the negativity that isn't there in the communication from the other side. It's the filter that allows me to go, well, hang on a second. Like, it's that. And
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I think you're
curiosity,
right.
curiosity
Mhm.
seems to be the thing. If I'm lucky enough, if I'm breathing enough to have the
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
space.
yeah.
Why
Yeah,
is
because it's
why
not
is
just
that?
like,
Why did I just react like that?
well, no, I mean, I think that highlights a wonderful point, and that is, like you said, you're looking sometimes for the negative in the communication that isn't there. What that means is that's my own filter. What's that mean? That's an old script. It's like an old cassette tape that I'm playing. That's just me that I'm only listening to, that nobody else can. And so I'm using it as a filter for all other information that I'm getting because I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel like I'm valued enough. And whatever information you're getting will funnel through that filter. That's that feeds that ego, that feeds the addiction, that feeds the fear that everything else kind of falls into. So it's not just the words that people say to you. It's most often the things that we say to ourselves.
People are gonna buy a ticket to see you come and give these lectures in Australia thinking they're coming along to a communication seminar, but they may not realize they're gonna wander into some, you know but that's where it comes from, because if you haven't really asked yourself these questions about, "Well, hang on, who am I in the world? Who do I show up to in public as? Who do I show up in my relationship as?" That
Yeah.
informs the tone of voice, how you speak to others, the the status that which you assume, "I am better
Mhm.
than, I'm less than." That informs all of it. And
No, yes.
and so I'm glad that people, they come to your work because they want to figure out how to have better conversations with their boss when they lift and they get that 1 minute with them, but they might
Yeah.
end up having a better time generally because of it all. It's cool.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah.
Awesome. Mate, I'm so grateful that we had time to speak. Thank you so much for
Same.
rescheduling. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
mate, I'm so grateful that you did it. I hope your
Okay.
family, are your family gonna come out and visit?
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole crew's gonna be there for. I think we're gonna be gone a whole month.
There you go. Well,
Yeah,
look,
so we're great.
when you're in the Sydney part of the tour, there's a
Mhm.
sauna in the backyard that's on every night, and I have found
Nice.
it to be an excellent place for conversation because
Yeah.
as someone
Okay.
who doesn't
Awesome. Sounds
drink,
great.
I don't go out. I'm like, where am
Nice
I going to chat with my friends? In here, when we're like,
sauna.
in our, you call them speedos, we call them budgie smugglers.
Yeah,
When we're sitting here sweating, that's where you get the
that's
good
lovely.
stuff. I'm going to promise you that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's hey. There's nothing like being in some heat that's gonna get some real conversation going.
That's the way.
All right, great. Thank
Have
you
a
for having
lovely
me.
evening. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.